online today. If this is your first time checking us out, welcome. We're so excited that you're here and we would love to get to know you better. Text Gold Creek to the number there on your screen and someone from our Connections team will contact you so that we can meet you. Also, if you call Gold Creek your home already, we are so grateful for you. We cannot have church without you. For your time, for your resources, for all of the energy that you give to our church, thank you so much. And if you're looking for an opportunity to get more involved by giving, text GC Lake Stevens to the number on your screen right now. Enjoy service.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Last week, here we go, of separation of church and hate. This is week 5. I'm excited to bring this message to you because there are some very specific elements that I'm going to be using today that have significance to me. So you get a little bit of insight into my life. So I'm very excited for you guys to hear this. Before I do that, let me recap real fast. First week, free to love. We talked that this is a love letter that John wrote, and then it became free to hate. Are there things that we can hate? Is there something that Jesus hates? And the answer was yes. He hated the separation between God and man, which is why he came. Then free to give. What does it mean to give your life? What does it mean to surrender yourself to Christ? Last week, free to let go. And this week, free to win. But before I jump into this, I want you to grab, if you can, some communion elements, because at the very end of this, we are going to close with communion. Grab some bread, crackers, whatever it is that you have that has some sort of a bread element, maybe a crouton, anything that you can find. Grab something, and also something to drink. It can be juice, it can be water, it can be wine, whatever you want. We're going to use those at the very end. So just keep that in mind. Last week, we talked again about what it meant to let things go, and I put my hand in this oil. Today, I'm not going to put my hand in this oil because I don't want to, but there's a reason why we have this. We call this deep frying for a reason. There is a depth to the love that Jesus has for us, and John, who was the last living original disciple of Christ, was boiled in oil. So there's a significance to this. Today, we fried something different every week. Last week was bacon. Today, we're frying donuts. I am making donuts today. You may ask, why? Well, when you look at the Apostle John, he was put in oil, and he came out sweet. Rather than being bitter, he came out sweet. He could have been a grumpy old man. As he's writing these letters, he's in the last few years of his life. He could be a grumpy old man, but he doesn't. He talks about love, and he talks about loving others. And not only that, this chapter, he talks about winning. But winning what? Let's go over that. I'm glad you asked. Free to win, that's today's topic. Can you win and still lose? That is a good question. Can you win and still lose? See, losing has different definitions when you really, really think about it. If you lost a race or a bet or a wager or any kind of combination of one of those, if you lost a race or a wager or a bet, can you still win if you gain the respect of who you lost the race to? Is that still winning? Technically, you lost the race, but you won the person's respect. Is that winning? Or if you come in 30th out of 30, there's 30 participants and you are dead last, number 30, but you still receive an award for participating, did you win? Are you considered a winner? Sometimes there's a lot of gray area when we're talking about winning and losing, and sometimes we're just not quite sure what to do with the circumstances. My son, when he was 5 years old, we put him in soccer because he's just a ball of energy. So we thought, let's get some of this energy out. And when I did this, the coaches explained to me the rules, and they said it's not really necessarily a rule situation. We're just going to kind of teach him fundamentals and ball technique and things like that. And at the very end, we're going to give everyone a trophy. And I really kind of struggled with that a little bit because I grew up playing in sports and things like that where if you didn't win, you didn't get anything. It was very Ricky Bobby. If you ain't first, you're last. And that's not necessarily overtly competitive. We just didn't hand out anything for just participating. So I really struggled with this. I struggled with that concept. I struggled with, is this something that my son is going to learn, that no matter what you do, you win? And I was kicking myself, and I'm a first-time parent at this point. It's my first child, and I want to make sure I do it right. I didn't give him any sugar for like the first 4 years of his life because I didn't want him addicted to sugar, and you just those first-time parent things, and by the second you're like, oh, Reese's cup, he found one. Oh well, he's got it. And here he is, and I'm first-time parent. I'm struggling. Do I let him feel this accomplishment, or do I not let him because he didn't earn it? And I'm just going through all of this. And finally the day comes and I just decide I'm not going to think about it anymore. I'm just going to let him have the trophy. He's going to be excited. It's a bear holding a cup. It's amazing. He'll love it. And the coaches all hand out the trophies and my son gets his and he looks at it and he looks at it for a minute, like a hot minute for a while, and he's just kind of looks at it and then he looks up at me and he's like, Dad, I got a trophy. I'm like, yes, you did. And he's like, cool. And he just chucks it and then he goes and plays. He didn't even care. He didn't even care that he got this trophy. For him, it didn't validate anything in that moment. For him, it was just this piece of hardware that he didn't even ask about. I literally picked it up. We took it home. We put it in the car. He didn't ask about it ever again because to him, it made no significance on value. There was no value to him. And I look at that example and I think of those things where we get stuff or we think we need something and our priorities are so out of whack that once we receive it, we realize we don't even need it. Like, why did I stress over this? Why did I worry over this? Why did I spend so much time, energy, resources, money, thoughts, stress, anxiety, and everything else above to put into this thing that I thought was going to be the reward that I wanted, and then I get it and it's not. And we do things like this, which is why John is warning us here as we read in chapter 5, verse 1, what it means to have boundaries and priorities. Let's go to verse 1. Everyone who believes that Jesus is the Christ has become a child of God, and everyone who loves the Father loves his children too. Verse 2. We know we love God's children if we love God and obey his commandments. So he uses the word commandments, and when we hear that, we think rules. That's typically the first thing that pops up. How is rules connected to love? How are boundaries, how are a list of demands, if you will, depending on how you want to word this, connected to love? Well, for one thing, when you follow the rules, it shows your love. Obedience for me has always ruffled my feathers. I've always struggled with obedience. As a kid, as a teenager, as an adult, I struggled when someone told me I could not do something. Even if it made sense, I struggled with it. Don't touch that pot, it is hot. But I want to touch it. And I would touch it and put my hand on it. Then I would burn myself. Sometimes I learned, sometimes I touched it again with the other hand to see if maybe it was just my right hand. And I used to do things like that. And if someone said, don't go in there, you can't go in there, it's dangerous, you can't go in there, it's off limits. What do you think I wanted to do more than anything? I wanted to go in there. And a lot of times I would wait till no one's looking and then I went in there. I don't know how many construction zones I went into because I just thought they were cool. And how I didn't die in some of those, I still don't understand. But when it came to following the rules, if you follow them, does it make you more loving? See, this is what John is trying to say, is by following his commandments, it shows our love. But does it really show that there's more love in you? Because when we think about it, Jesus had rules too. He had rules. Love God with all your heart. That was rule number 1. And the second one was love your neighbor as yourself. Rule number 2. Love God, number 1. Love others, number 2. Those were very clear, distinctive rules that Jesus gave us. And those rules, if followed, showed love in you. So if we back up and answer that question, do rules show love? The answer is yes. They show love. It shows where your intentions and your heart is. A way someone put this to me once is, obedience shows that you're all in. Someone said this once to me. I don't remember who it was, and it's going to drive me crazy. But he told me, if you're willing to submit yourself to the other person fully, it shows that you find value in them and there's a connection that you have. And the way that was worded to me is always kind of stuck with me, that it's not, when you talk about obedience and submission and the other person and things like that, it's not about you dying, it's about you living, but you investing into that other person. You guys know that one way that I show love for you guys is I cook for you. When you're around me, or you come to my house, or you come to my campus, I just love cooking. So whenever we do a series around food, I'm typically the one that jumps right in. Well, in verse 3, and I'm going to talk about that, why I do that in a second. Verse 3, loving God means keeping his commandments. Again, rules again. And his commandments are not burdensome. Is following hard. Sometimes it can be, absolutely. I like to cook. That's a lot of work for me. It really is, especially if I'm cooking some sort of an Asian cuisine. I'm basically chopping for 8 hours. That's just what you have to do to make the marinades and to make all the sides. And it's just constant chopping for a long, long time. But I do it, and it's hard because I love you guys. And when we think about the concept of fences, if I say to you this blanket statement, fences are designed to blank, what word pops into your head? Does the word fences are designed to restrict pop in your head? Or do fences are designed to protect pop into your head? One fence does both of those. One fence can absolutely do both of those. There are rules in place that if you break them, it can be good, and if you break them, it can be bad, right? And what's funny is, as we were going through this process, is there are signs all over the internet where people have created boundaries, if you will, because someone else has crossed them. If you've ever noticed in a lawnmower, there's a sign that says, don't put your hand in the blade. Did you know that was because of a lawsuit that a lawnmower company faced, that some guy decided, I'm going to put my hand in there while the motor is running to pull out some grass, and he cut off his fingers. He sued the company and he won. So from there on out, they put this sticker so that if anyone else ever did that, they cannot be sued. Those ridiculous things, like to me and you, maybe that's common sense. Yes, you don't put your hand into a blade that's spinning, right? But some people needed to see that sign. If I put my hand in there, it could get cut off. Well, right now I want to show you just a few signs, just like 3 or 4 signs. Just have fun with these. This is just something that just make you kind of smile and laugh a little bit. So go ahead and watch these and I'll come right back to you. Those are funny, right? I mean, some of those are hilarious. But I want to go back to these signs, and I want to go back to restriction or protection. The same fence can take 2 different views to 2 different people, multiple different views, right? I mean, multiple different people. If I put 10 people in a room and I put a fence in between 5 of them, splitting them 5 and 5, and I ask each one of the 10, what is this fence doing, protecting or restricting? I'm sure I would get probably a pretty close to 50-50 response. Some people see it as a hindrance, others see it as freedom. Others see it as freedom. How do you get to the freedom view? And that's what we're going to talk about. And I believe that that is the key to what John is trying to say in these verses. Is that even possible? Well, let's see. I believe the reason of freedom versus restriction, that thought process, that key of how you think, I believe that that was the reason why it took my personal father, my earthly father, my dad, why it took him so long to find Christ and to accept Christ into his heart. I believe that this was probably the biggest thing. He grew up with fences being a restriction. He grew up with that in his house. He grew that, and then when he became in the military and all of these things, this is kind of his mindset. And I honestly believe with everything inside of me, with every conversation that I can remember him, when he would talk about Christianity, he viewed it as a restriction, as rules, and not as freedom. And it wasn't until that happened that it really started, that switch is when it started really kind of sinking into him. You look at this oil is hot, don't touch it. Last week I touched it, right? It's hot, and I touched it. I put my hand in it, and I grabbed bacon out of it. When I say this oil is hot, don't touch it, am I restricting you or am I protecting you? Again, that's the key to, I think, what John is trying to say. Verse 4, for every child of God defeats this evil world, and we achieve this victory through our faith. And who can win this battle against the world? Only those who believe that Jesus is the Son of God. We are in a battle against evil. There is hate. There's a boiling pot happening right now. This week, there is an election. Everything's going to come to a head. It is going to be split down the middle again. It is going to be absolute just boiling. It is going to be boiling. And the spiritual battle that we are in daily is going to continue. It is going to continue, which is why I think it is important that we reset and we recalibrate while we have the opportunity right now. Because when we're talking about free to win, faith is the key to winning here. It is the key to winning. Faith in Jesus is the key to winning. It helps us win. But how? Because if you truly follow Jesus, your life should start to mold and shift and change in a way that reflects him. That's what it should do. See, you could probably argue that Jesus may have thought when he was here, because he struggled with his ultimate purpose, right? When he's in the garden and he's struggling with death and he's struggling with the torture that's going to happen, and he says, God, please just take this away from me. If it is your will, please take this cup, right? And he's struggling with this moment, and he's stressing out, and he's bleeding because he's stressing so much. And you could argue that he was looking at, this as possibly as a boundary issue, as a restriction issue, what can we do here? How do I win? And his faith in his purpose and his faith in what God was doing allowed him to continue for the next 3 days of probably the worst 3 days of any human life. He could have seen it as this hindrance, right? God, I'm trapped in this fleshy, weak body, and I'm about to be torn apart. But instead, he saw it as a freedom opportunity. He saw it as a freedom opportunity because he says over and over again through his ministry that he came to serve, to free man, to connect us back to God. That's what he did. The reason that I made donuts right here is my dad, he loved baked goods. And I made some fresh apple frosting as well too. So I'm gonna kind of drizzle that over here, and I'll show you guys the final product after I'm done here. But he loved his baked goods, and I didn't know why. He would always bring home, donuts and cakes and things like that from work, and he just had this kind of a sweet tooth to him. And I asked him, I said, Dad, you like, sweet stuff more than I do, and I'm a little kid at this point, right? And what little kid doesn't like sweets? And he kind of just told me that he's like, yeah, I kind of grew up with sweets in my life. His grandparents owned a bakery, so he would get cake and cookies and donuts all the time. So he grew up in that. He just kind of grew up in that environment where the smell of bread and the smell of fresh baked goods just created these memories inside of him. So he always loved donuts, and he would oftentimes bring donuts home, and he would bring these donuts, not these because I made these, but he would bring a box of donuts, and they were always different flavors, and he always loved the old-fashioned with no glaze, and I always thought that was gross. But now as I get older, I'm starting to like it more, so I'm becoming more and more like my dad. Remember a few weeks ago, the stuff that you do, that you become like your parents? Those are one of them. But here are donuts, and I want to show you here, camera. Look at this. It's a beauty. Good times right here. I'm not going to put any in my mouth even though I want to. But he loved these, and he would bring them home, and he would share them with me. And he would share them with my brother. And my mom didn't like sweets, so he didn't have to share with her. And he would give this to us because he loved his family. He really did. And there was this, but there was a disconnect. As much as he loved his earthly family, there was a spiritual element to it that was disconnected. Remember I talked before, there was this restrictive versus freedom block in his head. So he got it when it came to my brothers and his wife. But then when it came to the spiritual side, the eternal, he just didn't get it. He didn't understand why. There needed to be a light bulb moment. And in verse 6, Jesus Christ was revealed. This is the light bulb moment. Jesus Christ was revealed as God's Son by his baptism in water and by shedding his blood on the cross, not by water only, but by water and blood. And the Spirit, who is the truth, confirms it with his testimony. Jesus was baptized, and then he was sacrificed, and then Jesus lives through the Spirit. That is the ABCs of what happened. And this is the winning strategy that we're talking about. It starts with Jesus. He is our winning strategy. He was validated through baptism when he was baptized by John the Baptist, and he came up, God descended and said, this is my son. Listen to this guy. It started with the baptism, and then we were validated. He was validated through baptism. We were validated through his crucifixion, where God no longer saw a bunch of us that were doomed for eternal separation. He looked at us, and because of Jesus' sacrifice and his crucifixion, we now had a future, and we were his children. And he looked at us differently. Our winning strategy is so easy. It is. But it's also so difficult because it requires your surrender. The easy part is just believe and follow. The hard part is believe and follow. And that's it. And eventually, my donut-loving father found that same connection, that his family does not have to end on this earth, that there's an eternal element to this, that his relationship with God can continue, that doesn't have to be restrictive, but it can be free. And he ended up finding Christ, and he accepted Jesus. And he did it a few years before he died. But there's this moment that went off in his head, that light bulb, where he didn't see Jesus as rules and restrictions, but he saw him as freedom. What do you view Jesus as? Verse 11. And this is what God has testified. He has given us eternal life, and this life is in his Son. Whoever has the Son has life. Whoever does not have God's Son does not have life. Right there, we win, right? We live with God forever. Verse 13, I have written this to you who believe in the name of the Son of God, so that you may know you have eternal life. We are confident that he hears us whenever we ask for anything that pleases him. Right here, ask for something, but there's a catch. We need to ask for things that God wants us to ask for. How do we do that? That's a great question. When we're talking about the winning way, we got to ask for it. But are you afraid to ask? Sometimes I'm afraid to ask. I just know that there is something that I need to pray about, and I'm afraid to because I don't want to hear the answer. I get that. Or maybe you forget to ask. You know you should be praying about this all day. You don't do anything because you're busy with life. You get home, now it's time for bed, and you put your head on your pillow and you realize, oh man, I didn't pray about blank and whatever it is. And so then you start to pray, and then you doze off on your pillow. And you wake up at 2 in the morning and you're like, oh yeah, dear Jesus. And then you fall back asleep. And then at 3:30, oh, dear God. And you do this over and over again. Or you don't make time to ask. Or perhaps you ask for the wrong stuff. There's so many things that we do. And God is clearly saying, there's an easier way to do this. There's an easier way. And one of those easier ways that you can help shape the way you pray is you got to ask yourself, when you pray, are you praying for stuff or are you praying for people? Are you praying for stuff or are you praying for people? Do you pray for that job? Do you pray for that house, that car, that life? Or do you pray for the people that you work with? Do you pray for the people that you live with? Do you pray for those that don't have cars, that just have needs? Or do you pray for the people that are in your life that God has placed influence over, that you have influence over? Are you praying for stuff or are you praying for people? If you were sitting in front of me right now, you're in your living room, but if you're physically in front of me and I offered you one of these delicious apple frosted fall festival fun covered donuts, would you want one? Would you take one of these? If I gave you one of these beautiful donuts, would you take it? Would you want it? Is this something that would entice you? I mean, right now, I just want to put one of these donut holes in my mouth because it looks and it smells really good and they're still really warm. I can feel this cake platter. But what if I were to say, and I came to you and said, you want this donut? And you said yes. And I said to you, I will give you this donut. This is your donut to have. My only stipulation is that you need to share it with someone else. And I offered you that deal. I will give you this donut right here, this one with all this frosting, if you share it with someone else. And if you agree to it, then it's yours. And as I hand you this donut, and I put this donut on a plate, and then as you're getting ready to receive it, I put another donut. I give you two, because I see in your heart that you're willing to do this. See, that's the connection that I'm trying to get you to see with Christ and rules and boundaries and all of these things. This is what God is looking for in us, to share what God has given us, to share the best thing that we have, that He has given us, which is Jesus. And if we do that, we will have an abundance, that Jesus will continue to pour into us, that God will continue to pour into us so that you are never empty. But you have to be willing to do it. Now the next part, verse 21, dear children, keep away from anything that might take God's place in your heart. Here's the battle. He ends his chapter, or his first book, 1 John chapter 5, he ends it with a warning. He ends it with a message. You need to be careful, because there are going to be things that creep into your life that will be on purpose and that will be subtle. Either way, they have the same damaging response, which is it is going to separate you from God. Be careful. You are going to have opportunities to hate. You're going to have opportunities for bitterness. You're going to have anxiety. There's going to be pleasure. There's going to be money. There's going to be power. There's going to be work. There's going to be sex. There's going to be self. All of these things have the potential to creep into your heart that separate you from God. And that was the warning that John is giving us. So he ends this chapter, or he ends this letter with a keep your heart in check warning to us. Keep it right. He's been hammering love for almost 5.5 chapters. Love, 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 love. And then he closes with, guys, don't forget, guard your hearts. Why? Why would he do this? I mean, why not end with love God and love others? Peace, John out, drop the pencil. He doesn't do this because he understands that the key right here is where God's position is in your life. The key to loving others, the key to loving each other is understanding that if God is not number one in your life, that you are doing things on your own power and your own will and your own energy and your own timing and your own resources, when you do it that way, you know and I know that eventually it runs out. We all get tired, we all get lazy, we all get bitter, we all start to feel anxiety. All of these things, we feel these which pull back from our abilities. But God, He never does those things. He never runs dry. He never runs empty. And when we place Him first in our life, if we place Him at the top of our priority and we put everything else underneath Him, His love will eventually saturate the entire aspect of your life, every nook and cranny, every little divot that is in your life. If you put God first, His love will saturate and fill all of that. All of it. Your marriage, your job, your friends, thoughts, words, actions, everything. When you are aligned with God, it means that you see and feel God and you hear what He is trying to do and He guides you. And that's winning. That's winning. Because you are freely giving your life to Jesus, not because you feel restricted, but because you finally feel free. And you are free to love, and free to give, and free to let go, and all of these things, because He is number one in your life. So today, I wanted to close with communion for that very reason. But before I do, if you've never given your life to Christ, please, you have every opportunity, every single day. You could do it online. I met a kid once who gave his life to Christ over a sermon that he saw on TV. It is absolutely possible. Placing God number one in your life is the key to winning. So I encourage you with everything inside of me to do that. If you want to know more, you can absolutely comment in the message box. I will personally reach out to you if this is something that God is placing on you, that I just need to know Christ. I will personally reach out to you. Put it in the comments. I will find a way to PM you. Now I want to close with communion. Hopefully you have your bread elements. If you need to, you guys can hit pause and go ahead and grab your bread and your juice. But I want to lead you through this process right now. What Jesus did was he removed that separation, the thing that he hated so much. He got rid of it and said, I don't want this between you and the Father. And so he willingly gave up his life, willingly, for us to have freedom. And on that night, he took a piece of bread and he broke it into pieces and he handed it to his disciples. And he said, in a few hours, you're going to see something terrible. And in a few days, you're going to see something amazing. And it's not going to click right away, but one day it will. And after it clicks, I want you to do this every single time and remember what I did for you. So he took a piece of bread, he handed it to his disciples, and he said, take and eat. This is my body. It was given for you. Then he took a cup, and in that cup was wine, which is very traditional in a Passover meal as they were sharing together. And he looked at his disciples, and again, they didn't understand, but he was doing something. He was doing an object lesson for them so that they would remember one day when he says, guess what? You're going to be the person that's going to carry the mantle now. He looks at them, gave them bread. They didn't understand that they were receiving what they were receiving. And then he hands them this cup, and it had wine in it. And he says, my body I am giving, my blood I am giving. And this blood is going to cover your sin once and for all. After I die and my blood is spilled, God's wrath is appeased. You have life. So take and drink. This is a sign of remembrance of what I did for you. My blood being poured for you. So take and drink. We do this to symbolize and to worship. And so hopefully this was something that was deep inside of your heart, that we have a freedom in Christ. And I encourage you to take that freedom and to share these moments, these donuts, right? The freedom donuts with as many people as you can. I love you guys. I appreciate you guys. I want you guys to have a great week, and I'll see you next time.
thought by now they'd fall, but you have never failed me yet. Waiting for change to come, knowing the battle's won, for you have never failed me yet. Your promise still stands. Great is your faithfulness, your faithfulness. 'Cause I'm still in your hands. This is my confidence. You never fail me yet. I know the night won't last. Your word will come to pass. My heart will sing your praises. is your faithfulness, your faithfulness. I'm still in your hands. This is my confidence. You never fail me. Your promise still stands. Great is your faithfulness, your faithfulness. I'm still in your hands. And this is my confidence. You never fail me. You never fail us. Never fail.
Thanks so much for joining us today. To make sure that you stay up to date with everything happening at Gold Creek, check out our website, goldcreek.org, follow us on all of our social media platforms, and make sure you download the app onto your phone. Have a great week, and we'll see you next time.